No team in the AFC North has ever won the division 3 years in a row. The Ravens are going to be trying to change that this season, but they are going to have their hands full with competition from the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Browns. The AFC North is going to be the most exciting division in football. We're going to talk about why coming up on this NFL season preview, AFC North style.
This is the 2025 Locked On NFL season preview, only on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in to the 2025 Locked On NFL season previews. In this episode, we are focused on the AFC North. Appreciate everybody for being here. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season's around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. I'm Kevin Ostreicher. I'm the host of Locked On Ravens, and I'll be your host for this divisional preview. And joining me are my colleagues from around the Locked On Podcast Network. We have Jake Lisco of Locked On Bengals, Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, and Spencer German of Locked On Browns, bringing you all you need to know about what I think is going to be a really exciting AFC North division this year. Today, we're looking at contenders, what makes a successful season for each team, any early hot seats in the division, and what one thing could derail each team's season. We got win totals, MVP candidates. We're going to give each other some flowers too, even though sometimes we might not want to. We're going to give out some awards here. There's going to be a season-long battle for the division against each other, but guys, I want to start with usually what people talk about at the end, and that is who wins the division or why the Ravens maybe won't win. This is the Ravens division right now. They've won it back-to-back seasons, as I mentioned. No team has won it in 3 years in a row. Now, for me, I'll start because the Ravens won the division here. I think that something that the Ravens have going in their favor this year is their depth. They have a really tough schedule to start this season. They started 0-2 last year. Something that's interesting for the Ravens, guys, is the way that the preseason is handled. The Ravens don't play their starters. Some teams do, some teams don't. With their slow start last season, I know there's some concern within the Baltimore fan base about you get the Bills in week 1, and then obviously the homecoming game for Joe Flacco in the Browns in week 2, Spencer. That's going to be a big game in Baltimore. That, to me, slow starts can derail teams. Now, luckily, the Ravens, for their perspective, were able to get out of that. But if I had to give a reason why the Ravens wouldn't win this division, because I think that all the cards are there for them, man, I really do believe that if they start slow, they kind of escaped last year. That doesn't always happen. So, to me, I think that the Ravens have a good shot. But I think that some of these other teams, like the Bengals, the Browns, and the Steelers, are underrated. And we're going to go in order of how the division finished last year. So, Chris, is there a reason to you why the Steelers could maybe dethrone the Ravens this year in the AFC North? Do you think this is Baltimore's division to lose? How are you feeling about Pittsburgh right now?
I mean, I like what the Steelers have been doing, but I still think this is absolutely Baltimore's division to win. I think that they're the favorites. They're one of my Super Bowl favorites this year, as far as how they're looking. I love how Baltimore drafted. I think they have a lot of young guys that have been coming up pretty well. You got to love guys like Kyle Hamilton, guys like Zay Flowers. I'm excited to see Nate Wiggins this year. But I loved Malachi Starks and Mike Green. I thought Mike Green he was 16th on my top 100 big board, and they got him in the second round. I know for different reasons, but still, yeah. I love what the Ravens did there. I think they could just continue to build, and it's that depth that I think is making them really interesting. Not only do they have the star power up top with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and all these other guys, but they have guys throughout the roster that make them dangerous, and they're a more complete team. I think they might be one of the most complete teams in the NFL, so they're going to be dangerous. If the Steelers are to dethrone them, I think a lot of it would have to be like, look, the Ravens have a really tough schedule, just being the division winner, the teams that they got to face. Maybe they face some injury problems, and we all know Mike Tomlin gets the Steelers always to a winning record. I think the Steelers roster has improved over this offseason. I think that they're going to be a little bit better against the run with some of the additions that they've made. I think that that's going to help free up their pass rush a bit more. And I think what they're changing in their defense is going to make them a little bit more dangerous there. And I also think the offense is going to be marginally better than it was last year. And if you get those two things, they could be a team that if Baltimore slips, I can see them catching them, but I still have Baltimore winning it, Steelers, Bengals battling out for wild card spots.
Jake, with the Bengals, the Ravens and Bengals played two of the most electric games of the season, in my opinion, last year. The Ravens, quite honestly, somehow snuck it out, even though I don't think they really were supposed to both times. It was obviously an offensive shootout both ways. Did the Bengals do anything this offseason in your mind that you think gives the Bengals more of a shot to dethrone Baltimore this season? Or do you think that Baltimore has the upper hand again? How do you feel like this division goes for Cincinnati this year?
I think I largely agree with Chris that it's Baltimore's division to lose, win, however you want to phrase it. I think they are the favorites for a reason. They have depth. They have a well-rounded roster with strengths in the trenches, with some playmakers, whether it's the tight ends, whether it's Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson on offense. The defense goes deep, like the additions on the defensive side of the ball in the offseason as well. And the addition of, in particular, Jair Alexander is, if he's healthy, potentially the thing that tips a balance back toward the Ravens, if there was a balance that was tipping. I would say that if Joe Burrow and the offense for the Bengals can run back the year they had previously, and they get any sort of bounce from the defense, not that Monday Night Football really gave us much that bounce is coming, but if they can figure things out and, the coach speak about, it's preseason, we're not showing our hand, and it's not just, run fit issues, which is what it looks like to me. Guys can't get off blocks and they have guys in the wrong place trying to defend the run. But if they can figure something out on defense, get Trey Hendrickson back in the building, get back toward average on defense, the Bengals were a very small margin away from being in contention for the division last year. Those two Baltimore games at the center of it. So with those kind of coin flips last year and largely the same offense in place, there is a world where you could see variance going that way. But I do think on paper, hard to argue with the Ravens as favorites.
But now I think we have to get to the team everybody thinks she's going to challenge the Ravens the most in the division. That is the Cleveland Browns. No, but in all seriousness, Spencer, I think that the Browns, with their quarterback situation, is one of the more polarizing storylines in the NFL this season. They named Joe Flacco their starter. As I mentioned, that week 2 game against Baltimore is going to be big to kind of open the Ravens season at home. What's one reason you think the Ravens won't win this division? What's one reason you think the Ravens will win this division? And do you think Cleveland can play spoiler in any way to any of these teams in the North this season?
One reason why they will win the division, I think, is simple. You have Lamar Jackson as your quarterback. He's one of the best players in football, one of the most electric players in football. A lot of fun, no matter, when he's playing the Browns, it's always sort of a joy just to watch him go to work. You're watching one of the best players ever. And there's always kind of this chess match between him and Myles Garrett, which is always kind of cool when those two teams face off. But he's brilliant, and he had another MVP caliber season last year, which obviously was given to Josh Allen instead. But yeah, anytime you have that player, you obviously have a chance to do some things. And I think the only thing to me that feels like it derails a Ravens three-peat as division champs would be injuries. If those things sort of start piling up, if guys get hurt, if Lamar gets hurt, obviously that would be the biggest blow. And so if those guys can hold up though, I think it is absolutely their division to lose. The thing that's interesting with the Browns is last year they were just non-competitive in most games. And I think Kevin, you saw it firsthand. They somehow stole one against the Ravens at home. It just happens. And I think that's honestly the beauty of this division just in general. Is it almost feels like sometimes you throw out the records because you line up on that field, and in this division, anything can sort of happen on any given Sunday, as cliche as it sounds. And I've kind of been saying for a while, if the Browns just get competent offense, not that I think they're going to challenge the Ravens for the division by any stretch, but week 2, we've been talking here in Cleveland a lot about the gauntlet of a 6-game schedule that the Browns start with. And I'm kind of listen, early in the season is when you kind of want to play some of those teams because that's the chance to maybe pick some of them off if they do get off to slow starts. So we'll see what it kind of looks like early on. But I do think that the Ravens obviously have what it takes to overcome any sort of slow start that could happen or whatever because they have everything. They pretty much have everything covered from top to bottom. And it would be crazy to think that anybody else in this division should go into the season as the favorite.
There's some witchcraft out there, though, man. We all know it. Nobody wins this division 3 years in a row. And so we'll see what happens this year. Maybe Baltimore breaks that streak. But like you led this conversation with, Kevin, nobody wins this division 3 years in a row. It hasn't happened in the division's history. Relatively young division, right? It used to be the AFC Central. But if it happens this year, it would be the first time. So we'll see what kind of path we take to get there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because usually there's something that always just falls that team's way, not in their favor. So we'll figure that out.
This episode is brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football is not far behind. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or even breakout running backs this season, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the game. Plus, they offer weekly flyer options already for Week 1, where Dak Prescott's max discount for kickoff against the Eagles is more than 0.5 passing yards. Take advantage of that inside of the Prize Picks app today. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDON NFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game.
The 2025 Locked On NFL season previews continue. A reminder, you can get daily coverage of your favorite NFL team by subscribing to their Locked On podcast. And we also have the NFL covered nationally. We got Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Scouting, Peacock and Williamson, Locked On Fantasy Football, Locked On Dynasty Football. It just goes on and on and on. You can get that 24/7 coverage of the NFL with our brand new Locked On NFL stream, free on YouTube and Amazon's Fire TV. All right, guys, it's expectation time. And with expectations do come things that can derail those expectations. So I'll start off with the Ravens here, being the division winner from last season. I mean, expectations in Baltimore here, it's Super Bowl or bust. And it feels like that has really been the MO for the Ravens the past 2 seasons. 2024 was disappointing with their end that they suffered at the hands of the Buffalo Bills in the divisional round. They were able to improve their roster, in my opinion, this offseason, getting guys like Jair Alexander and DeAndre Hopkins in the building, bringing back Ronnie Stanley. You know, Chris, you mentioned guys like Malachi Starks and Mike Green, who they drafted. You know, it just feels like they didn't really lose a ton, but they gained a lot more. But to me, and Jake, I kind of agree with your point. I think health is the thing here. You know, health is a big factor in the NFL and sports. And for as good as the Ravens' depth is currently, you know, when we're sitting here again and the season's over in December, January, these teams are going to look a lot different roster-wise in terms of who's healthy, who's not, who's on IR. Did they have to sign anybody, trade for anybody? And right now, the Ravens already kind of have an issue with Jair Alexander and his knee. He hasn't practiced in, at the time of this recording, almost 2 weeks. Not really a lot of updates from the Ravens on Jair right now. So, you know, obviously, I think the team is able to survive and win as long as Lamar Jackson is there. As long as Lamar's on the field, they have a chance to win football games. Now, you got to throw Cooper Rush in that conversation. I think we have to maybe change the outlook at the division a little bit. But I think that the Ravens have everything to be successful and win a Super Bowl this season. Obviously, you got to play the games on paper. But honestly, guys, we know the book on the Ravens is the playoffs. You know, they're a great regular season team. But when it comes to the playoffs, there's always that one game, always that one moment that the Ravens falter in. And they have provided that reputation for themselves. So that's what they have to get over. Chris, I want to go to you next. The Steelers, they bring in Aaron Rodgers after a very long and maybe painstaking wait in terms of when he was going to sign, where he was going to sign, officially happened. They bring in Derek Harmon in the draft in the first round. I thought they got pretty good value throughout the draft, in my opinion. Where do you think the Steelers are right now in terms of expectations? A lot of people obviously assuming, and maybe even Aaron Rodgers himself, that this is his last year in the NFL. So hopefully for his sake, he wants to go out with a bang. Is he the thing that could derail the Steelers the most, though, or is there something else on your mind?
I honestly think Aaron Rodgers isn't the biggest thing. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, if he just implodes and gets way too old, like if he goes completely nuclear, they'll probably just bench him and put in Mason Rudolph. Like he'll just like, hey, Aaron, you don't got it no more, bro. But like, I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be fine in terms of what they are. I think there's 2 things that really derail the Steelers this year. One, major injuries to their stars and key players on defense, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward. Also, I'll say Jalen Ramsey. I wasn't so sure about Jalen Ramsey when just looking up what he did in Miami, but the way they're using him in this Steelers secondary and the ways they're changing how this secondary operates and the assignments that they hand out, this defense is going to be a lot more aggressive with how they blitz, when they call man coverage. A lot of times they've been calling like shadow mans where they try to align with man, but they're just going zone because for years they've had Levi Wallace covering Jamar Chase. Are you really wanting to him covering man-to-man? But they're going to trust Joey Porter Jr. and Jalen Ramsey particularly to do that a lot more this year. And I think it's going to allow them to be more flexible there. But they need these guys to be healthy. They need their stars on defense to be healthy. And when TJ Watt has not played since he's been drafted by the Steelers are 1-10 when he doesn't play. So they cannot afford for him to be out. He looks healthy and great in camp, so I don't think that's an issue. The other thing that could really derail them is the lack of development in their offensive line, which I I've said all season long, Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, all that thing, great storylines. The bottom line is this O-line has to develop this year. And I like what I've seen out of Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick, all four of their young guys. I thought they had really good camps. I thought they're having good preseasons. They're checking a lot of boxes, but they need to be able to develop a run game that's at least in the upper half of the league as far as efficiency. They also need to protect Aaron Rodgers, keep him upright, and make sure that he's not having to dodge sacks left and right the way Joe Burrow was against the Commanders the other night. So I think that's the two things. If the defense falls, you'd suffer some major injuries, or if the offensive line doesn't come together, those are the two things that could derail the Steelers season that I think are the most prevalent.
Isn't it so beautiful how transitions work like that, Chris? That was wonderful. We can go right into the Bengals now with Joe Burrow and what we saw from that offensive line and from that defense, Jake. I know that a lot of people feel like that is what could derail the Bengals this season. That defense not being able to support what Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins can do on the field together. We know that's such an elite trio, but is the expectation that the offense can carry the defense to where they want to go, or is that defense just too big of a weight on the ankle of Joe Burrow to overcome?
If the defense is what it is last year, I think it's too big of a weight for any quarterback to overcome. You just don't see teams win consistently enough when you can't give a team like 30 seconds or 8 seconds or whatever it is at the end of a game, or you get the Chiefs into a 4th and 16 and then you have a 7th round pick on the field in his second professional game and he commits defensive pass interference to keep the Chiefs in the game. The Chiefs ultimately win the game on that drive. So I don't think that they can overcome the defense no matter how good the offense is, unless it is truly the best offense of all time. And I don't think that they're trending in that direction if the defense is what it is last year. I think the talk about the offensive line is a little bit overblown. We'll see what happens with the guards. The reaction to Monday Night Football in the preseason against Washington Commanders is hilarious. If you actually go watch how the offensive line played on tape, they were fine. Joe Burrow didn't handle the pressure very well. I would say, if anything, Joe Burrow wasn't very good in that game, made bad decisions under pressure. But we've been asking the Bengals to make another move at guard for a long time. They ran Lucas Patrick and Dylan Fairchild out in that game. Dylan Fairchild looks like he's had a very promising preseason as a 3rd round pick, thrust into a starting role at left guard. But at right guard, there's a bigger question. So if you're looking for a question on offense, I'd say it's at right guard. I'd say it's, do they develop any sort of running game this year with a team that is so geared to pass the ball and needs that outlet to finish games, especially if the defense goes like it did last year, and just at times get them into manageable downs and distances, because you can't just throw the ball on every single first down. That said, expectation is still very high for the offense. The defense is just, I'll believe it when I see it at this point, man. They've been good in practices against a good offense, but in these games, we're seeing them get blown off at the point of attack and not have good gap discipline in the run game. And those things were major issues last year that seem to still be there.
Yeah. And I think the Bengals, might have the highest variance of any team this season based off of what they do defensively, just because of the way that offense we know can put up points in a hurry. So I think that's one of the more interesting storylines that the North even has this season.
Let's just call it what it is. To slide down in preseason games, and their offense will be fine. That's the thing that derails their expectations. If you trust to make too many plays in a preseason,
it happened, and he's safe. That's what counts. Although yes, I know, and that's why I talked about.
Now put him in bubble wrap.
I had the tweet at the end of the first quarter that somebody needed to put a black bag over his head and zip time to the bench to get him out of the game, and then he goes back out there for the second quarter anyway. So he got out of the game healthy. That's what matters. Hopefully he got what he needed out of those preseason reps, but nobody wants to see that in the preseason.
Yeah. Spencer, I still think, obviously the Ravens, the Bengals, the Steelers competing for playoff spots. The Browns, I know a lot of people are not there with them, but I still think there are positives you can take away from a season where you don't make the playoffs. So what are the expectations in Cleveland, and what to you would derail positive momentum that Cleveland could potentially take out of this, whether it is Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders showing that they can be the guy in Cleveland, or young talent stepping up? What's the vibe in Cleveland right now?
I think it depends on which group of fans you ask. If you ask the group of fans that think the expectation should be lose as many games as possible and be in line to maybe draft Arch Manning next year, then those people, what would derail their plans is the Browns winning 6, 7, 8 games somehow, like I talked about earlier. And maybe Joe Flacco plays well enough that he starts half the season and it's like, oh no, like now we're wasting time with this guy and we shouldn't be doing this. that would probably be the thing that derails that expectation if that's how a Browns fan is inclined to feel. But if you're a Browns fan going into the season, there always is a contingent of Browns fans that go into every year and talk themselves somehow. I mean, I know people the year they went 0-16 who thought like this team's going to sign some people. It's going to happen. So there's always that group of fans that talks themselves into a season being better than what people are giving it credit for, and that maybe they find a way to contend and be in that playoff graphic in December about being in the hunt or whatever. And so if that's where you're at with it, I do think the thing that maybe derails that is simply just like, Joe Flacco. You have to go through all these quarterbacks and go through like nobody sort of establishes themselves as a quality starter would be the number one thing. I think though, if you're just talking strategically, like this team needs to have a good run game again. And they're going back to Kevin Stefanski's offense, like the basics of it, the standard offense that he operated when he came here and the reason he was hired. And the offense, frankly, that they've had the best results with since he's been the head coach here. And that all revolves around the idea that you have a great run game. You can run play action off of it. It's all the stuff that Joe Flacco did really, really 23 when they made that run of the playoffs. So if your hope is that the Browns have success, the thing that's going to derail this is if they cannot get a run game going. And that's an interesting situation when you consider that their projected top running back, Quinshon Judkins, still hasn't shown up to camp. I don't know, maybe by the time this airs, he will have shown up to camp, but as things stand going into this final preseason game, he is not there, still sort of working through the NFL's investigation. So until he shows up, it's going to be unclear sort of what that run game looks like. And there's a lot of questions at the skill positions otherwise. So it all kind of revolves around the offense. That's the thing I think that derails any potential hopes that this team has of contending. But yeah, if it's the opposite feeling and you're just looking for a franchise quarterback and you're looking for young guys to develop, those guys getting hurt, not getting a chance to see Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, if that's what you're rooting for, would obviously be a massive blow for some fans. But I don't think you're going to have to worry about that because I'm not expecting Joe Flacco to start 17 games. I think at some point you'll see those rookies play and get a chance to evaluate them at least a little bit.
Yeah, we know there's a lot of talent in this division too, guys. And I quickly want to run through the top 100 that we did as a network and just some of that grouping. Lamar Jackson got the top spot, followed by Myles Garrett and Joe Burrow. Number 4 and number 5 were the next two rated players in this division. Jamar Chase came in at 7, TJ Watt 11, Derrick Henry number 14, Trey Hendrickson came in at 20, Kyle Hamilton 26, Cam Hayward 42, Denzel Ward 84, and Roquan Smith 89. So there's a lot of talent in this division, guys. How do we feel that this list stacked up? Who do we think has the most stacked roster? And were there any snubs from our respective teams? I think for me, I'm just going to say it. Tyler Linderbaum, Marlon Humphrey, I think could have both gotten a spot on this. I agree.
I wrote Tyler Linderbaum in for what it's worth. I don't know why.
Okay. We appreciate that over here in Baltimore, but I'll just open the floor to everybody. Is there anybody that you guys thought from your teams weren't represented at all?
I'll say real quick.
From Cincinnati.
Yeah. I was on a crusade to get Jerry Jeudy in the top 100, but I can explain that more at another time. He had a great season last year. I really like his game. If he does it again this year, maybe people will start to care more. But that was my only one that I felt like was a snub from the Browns side.
Yeah, Chris. Anybody from you thought that everybody was pretty well represented?
I thought it was kind of fair for the Steelers as far as who was in there. I think Jalen Ramsey, because he played in Miami, didn't necessarily earn it with his previous year with the Dolphins. But I think when you see him play in this secondary this year, he's going to be in that list. I think that he is the way that Mike Tomlin, the Steelers defense, is using him is he's really excited about it. Kind of the way like Minkah Fitzpatrick, when he joined the Steelers, a lot of people were like, what is he going to do? He wasn't that good in Miami. And then all of a sudden, whoa, first team all pro. And I'm not saying Jalen Ramsey is going to be the best corner in the league or anything like that again, but I do think he's going to bring a bit of a different taste to what the Steelers cornerback position has been for the past few years. So I'm not saying that he should have been in the top 100 for this edition, but I think that he will be this time next year.
Do we think that the Ravens have the best roster? Would you guys argue for any other roster? Is it consensus or?
Yeah, I mean that's why they're the favorites. They should be to have the best roster. They had the most in the top 100, I believe. There, I'm just looking at it. It makes the most sense. So I guess the Bengals had 3 in the top 100 because Trey Hendrickson was there. But no, the Ravens had 4.
The Ravens had 4 guys.
Yeah, so yeah, they deserve it.
Yeah.
Top to bottom, tough to make an argument there.
Yeah,
I mentioned, all levels. And even when you get to some of the backups, they're players that I think could start for some other teams.
Yeah, they've put themselves in position for sure to potentially make a Super Bowl run here. But we've gone over which teams have the best rosters, but which teams have the best players in the NFL? Are there any MVP candidates in this division? I'll spoil that for you. Yes, there are. It is the 2025 Locked On NFL season preview of the AFC North.
Today's 2025 NFL season preview is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know, FanDuel, they are America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, with the NFL season right around the corner, they want to get you in the game with an offer that you simply can't miss, because new users can bet just $5 and win up to $300 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. And you can use that all across the app for NFL season futures. You can even go through what I do on my Sunday morning routine. I like to pull up my phone, go into the FanDuel Sportsbook app, and then I'll go through the morning games. I'll pick all the money lines, and then the primetime slate, I'll go through and I'll do player props and parlay them together inside of FanDuel. That's part of my routine. But FanDuel, once again, wants to make sure if you sign up today as a brand new customer, you bet $5, your first bet wins. You'll get $300 in bonus bets guaranteed. So make sure you check it out. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com.
The 2025 Locked On NFL season previews continue. And a reminder, you can get daily coverage of your favorite NFL team by subscribing to the Locked On podcast. We also do, again, have the NFL covered nationally. We got Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Scouting, Peacock and Williamson, Locked On Fantasy Football, and Locked On Dynasty Football. And again, you can get that 24/7 coverage of the NFL with our brand new Locked On NFL stream. It's free on YouTube and Amazon's Fire TV. All right, guys, MVP candidates. I think there are two that stand out here, and that is Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. Lamar being a two-time MVP, Joe Burrow looking for his first, but he was certainly in the conversation last season. I know a lot of the argument against Joe last year was team record, whereas for Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, I mean, those were the 3 seed and the 2 seed respectively. Those guys are perennial MVP candidates. Spencer, Chris, do you think TJ Watt, Myles Garrett sneak into that, or is this a quarterback award still?
What are we doing? It's a quarterback.
That's what I'm asking. Quarterback award.
It is a quarterback award, and as far as I mean, unless the mighty Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett are stepping up, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be more of an efficient quarterback. Even if Aaron Rodgers has the best version of what he could have this year, it's an efficient quarterback numbers. He's not testing anybody for like Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson are. So it is a two-headed race in the AFC North as far as the MVP race. I will say, watch out for Watt and I'd say Ramsey for Defensive Player of the Year candidates this year.
Very quickly, guys, let's get a prediction from each of us on where these teams finish in the division, alongside maybe an underrated move for your team, or how this offseason went for your team. So for me, I think an underrated move that's kind of going under the radar is DeAndre Hopkins. The Ravens brought him in. I think a lot of people, and he's not prime Texans DeAndre, but for me, I think that as a number 3 wide receiver behind Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, you're not really asking him to be that guy. So I think in a more specific role, that is the move that I like, is kind of an underrated one that the Ravens made that people aren't talking about. I have the Ravens winning the division. I have the Bengals finishing number 2 and the Steelers finishing 3 by literally a game. Honestly, I could see them being tied with division record being the tiebreaker or head-to-head. And then I have the Browns at number 4. Chris, what about you?
My underrated move is Jalen Ramsey. I talked about it earlier. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him because he wasn't as active in the Dolphins secondary, but I think the Steelers have some serious plans. You looked at the way they in the Minkah Fitzpatrick's best years, they set up a lot of plays where he was the guy that was going to create the turnovers. And when he did, he was first team All-Pro 3 different times, and he was a big part of it. But in the last couple of years, he wasn't getting a lot of those targets deep anymore. Teams are just like, we're not testing him. In fact, Sports Information Systems charted him last year to be targeted just 4 times on balls that traveled at least 20 yards in the air, and all 4 were incomplete passes. But it was just, that's not enough. And so the Steelers said, all right, fine, we'll make our superstar our cornerback and move him close to the line of scrimmage. And they're moving Jalen Ramsey everywhere. He's covering left outside, right outside, slot. He's going to be a big factor. He's also probably going to take a lot of those number 1s. I'm intrigued to see how he does with Jamar Chase and what their plan is with him. But I think he's the underrated move because they're going to use him in a different way that's going to maximize his skill set a bit more. I'm going chalk here. I'm having a repeat from last year. Ravens 1, Steelers 2, Bengals 3, Browns 4. I think that what the Steelers have done, and the biggest thing I think that really helps the Steelers is I think they've made a lot of good young investments in recent years where I think their offensive line's going to mature. They're going to be a solid unit. I think a lot of the linebackers that they have I think they're really deep at that position. That's going to help this defensive front that they've been adding to. I think they're going to be much better against the run, which is going to help their pass rush and in turn help their coverage. I think they finished with a top 5 defense. They've had a top 10 defense for 3 straight years. I think that's a factor there. And I think as long as Aaron Rodgers, just reads the field, does a solid job there, which is all they've really needed the last 5 years. This is the 5th straight year they've had a different starting quarterback to start the season. I think this team finishes second, makes the playoffs, and as long as they can get to like the 5 seed and play like the Texans or whoever that 4 seed is, I like their chances to go in and at least battle in the playoffs this time around instead of just getting stomped out the first round.
Jake, what about you? Underrated move, and then quickly, what's your division order?
I don't think I have an underrated move. They need to make a move. I think the Bengals offseason grade is generally incomplete. The Trey Hendrickson thing lingering over them at this point is ridiculous. They had a visit that, as of the time of recording, did not lead to signing Dalton Reisner. I think that move would have helped me feel better about the offseason as well. So I think they just didn't do enough in the offseason to answer that question. As far as the division goes, though, I'm just going to be spicy for fun. I'm going to go for fun and not for accuracy here. And I'm going to say that there's some magic in the air that no team can ever win the AFC North 3 years in a row. And just because I host Locked On Bengals, I'm going to put the Bengals in first. And in fact, I'm going to put the Steelers in second place. I agree with you, Chris. And we're going to
say what just happened?
Things are going to go so crazy with the witchcraft for Baltimore that we're going to see Baltimore finish third. And it's just not enough witchcraft to help the Browns out of the cellar. So we're leaving the Browns in the cellar. I'm having fun with it, guys. What do you want from me?
Okay, 45 minutes at least the fun is, I think I legitimately can only think of Lamar getting injured as a way that would happen.
And I don't want to wish that into the world.
No,
I'm just trying to do witchcraft and play on the theme.
Well, we know that if that happens, Jake, we're gonna have to sit back down and talk about what you know, because that is it's spicy and it's fun. Spicy and it's fun. Spencer, what about you? Underrated move, division rankings. What do you got?
I think underrated move, I already sort of mentioned about the Malik Collins signing was one that I was really high on. Again, I said it, but top 10 in pass rush win rate on the interior of a defense last year. Playing alongside Miles, I think is going to help him immensely as well. So I really liked that move. Sort of flew under the radar. Nobody was paying attention to the Browns all season, so rightfully so. And then for the division, I came in ready to give people something to talk about. So I'll say the top 2 stay the same for me. Ravens, Steelers. I think I'm not going to go too crazy here, but I'm going to say the Browns finish in 3rd and the Bengals finish in 4th. That defense was atrocious on Monday Night Football. It was awful.
Joe Burrow
can only overcome so much.
Let me just say something here.
Chris needs to process.
This is history.
George Sanders is the franchise quarterback. Anyway,
this is history right here. Not because of the Bengals being in last. Honestly, this is the first time that since I have joined Locked On, this is my 7th season covering the Steelers for Locked On, that the Locked On Browns host has not picked the Steelers to finish last. That's 6 straight years they were picked to finish last. You just broke the streak. Spencer German, congratulations. You are making history here.
I had to be somewhat of a realist here. I'm trying to have some fun with it like Jake, but I'm not going to go too crazy.
I know. I was just all cookie cutter. I needed to get the spice in it. Man, I love it. I love it. So there's a lot to like in this division this year. And thank you for everybody for listening to the 2025 Locked On season preview with the AFC North. Again, I'm Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens. With me, Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers, Jake Lisco from Locked On Bengals, and of course, Spencer German from Locked On Browns. If you want to hear how the other divisions will play out this year, subscribe to Locked On NFL wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.